Welcome to class. I'm Temi. I'm your fashion tutor at TCG Fashions. So today I'll be showing you how to take accurate measurement for your basic bodice construction using Natalie Berry's method. I mentioned earlier that we are measuring in centimeters. There are two sides on your tape. This bigger side is inches, then the smaller tiny side is centimeter. So for this construction, we're using centimeter to measure. So let's just get started. There are a few measurements you need to measure on the body, and there are some things you have to take note of before you start measuring. The first thing is if you see look at my client, the top she's wearing is very light. She's not wearing something bogus. So somebody can't come to measure and the person is putting on agbada or suit or something very thick. That even the clothes circumference is like 4 inches, or that's like 2.5 times 4, that's like 10 cm. You wouldn't get accurate measurement that way. In some countries, their measurement clothes, when the client gets to the factory or to the construction house, they give them something to change into, something very skin tight next to the skin. But here in Nigeria, we don't do that. So that means you have to tell your client to wear something light while they are coming. So after that being said, when you are measuring a small figure, you take your circumference measurement tighter, not choking, but a bit firm. When you are measuring a big figure, you take the circumference a little bit less tight. The reason is because when you are constructing your pattern using this method, there's something we call ease. We add ease to our construction so that you don't have something that is too big at the end of the day. So that being said, you will take the circumference measurement like so. You will put the tape around the biggest side of the bust, and like I said, she's not big and she's not small, so I'll just measure it normally. But if you are comparing me to her, I'm smaller, so if I'm to measure myself, I'll make it tighter. But for her, I'll just I'll not make it too generous because she's just perfect. So I beg your pardon, let me do that again. So that means the bust measurement is about 100 centimeter. But while you are measuring the bust, you need to ensure that the tape is not folding at the back. Can you see? It can't twist. If it twists at the back, it will alter your measurement. And the tape should not sag. Sagging means it's going downward in this manner. The commonest error is for the tape to sag. It's really not convenient for the tape to go higher than necessary. So it's either it twists or it sags. So you have to check and to ensure that it doesn't twist and it doesn't sag. So that's that. You measure around the biggest side of the bust and take the measurements. When you are measuring, ensure you read the measurements at the side. Don't read in front. That way, there are some ethics to tailoring also. If you are reading in front, you might be touching your client unnecessarily. Some people don't like it. In fact, even if they like it, it's not good. So just take the measurements by the side like so. So that's 100. Then the second thing you need to know is that for basic bodies using this method, you need to note your natural waistline. When you get the natural waistline, you will need to put maybe a tiny rope or tie a tape or anything around that natural waistline. Why do we do that? You don't want to detect the waistline now, and the next minute you want to measure something else, you've shifted away from there. It is important that you get accurate measurement for the waistline. So how do you get your natural waistline? When you bend sideways, there's a part that naturally folds inside on your body. That's the natural waistline. Everybody has, even the big side people, the big size. If they bend, so far they can have a bend at this corner, at this side, that means they also have a natural waistline. It might not be defined in bigger people, but everybody has. And there are some times that you might not need to bend. Over time, you know it by just observing. I can feel at home. If she bends sideways, you can bend. But this is the part that will bend inward. So I will just put a tape around this. You can use your ribbon if you have, but this is the one that I could find. So not too tight, but something to let you know that this is natural waistline. If you are making a bodice that will have joining, maybe dress, or you want to add the skirt to the dress, it is important that it joins at the natural waistline. That way it gives a better look. Okay, after that being said, you will then take the measurement of the waist. Just take it above the ribbon, the fold this way. And like I said, she's not making it tight nor loose because she's just a perfect figure. So our own is 84. If I'm measuring for myself, I will make it tighter. I'll make it like maybe 82. assume it is for me. Do you understand the difference now? Okay, so that's that. You take your waist circumference and record. The next thing you need to take is okay, let me just take the front, then we'll go to the back. You will need to, we call this part neck point. This part after your neck, the highest part of your shoulder, is called neck point. So that is where you start all the length measurements, and you have to ensure that it is at the middle of the shoulder. Don't start measuring towards the back or too forward. It has to be at the middle of the shoulder, immediately after the neck region. That is the neck point, this side. So you take your tape this way, then you measure all the vertical length measurements. We measure neck point to the chest level. The chest level is at the middle of your armhole. For her, it is 16 centimeters. The shoulder to bust for her is 30 centimeters. The bust, I mean where the nipple is located. And by that, I don't mean you should start looking and pressing for the nipple. You will just see. You will see that, okay, this is the widest part of the body and this is where the nipple should be. So you take your tape on it and you can read this way. Then you take, can you see, I've taken two measurements already. The first is the chest level. The second is the nipple point. I'm taking the under bust. When you are doing bustier, those bust tightening and other shabby styles, you will need this under bust measurement. So under the bust is where the bra wire sits. Immediately after the bust. Did you get that? Under your bust. So just where the bra wire sits, you will take the tape there. Are we together? So you measure. Then while it's still like this, then you measure the waist length. Our waist length is 40.5. No? This is 40, yes, 40.5. That's the waist length. Did you understand that? So you might need to rewind and watch over and over again, you know, to get that. So that's that. Then there's something we call across chest. We might need to face the camera. Across chest is you are measuring from, let me just use a layman's language, from one armhole to the other armhole around the upper part of the chest, not on the bust. Actually gave us a guideline. He told us to measure from this hollow part of the neck, this part, you know, this hollow part of the neck. He told us to measure 13 centimeter downward. Are we together? Then on that 13 centimeter downward, you take your across chest measurement. So just come from this hollow part and measure 13 centimeter. And where that 13 stop, then you measure from the end, this part, this end of the armhole, this part. Can you see? Can you see? From where the sleeve join to the bodies on this side to where the sleeve join to the bodies on the other side. Okay? So I will just take the measurement like so. Our one is 39. So that's that about the front. Maybe for now. Okay, there's something we call nipple distance. That is a spot between one nipple and the other nipple. You will need that in constructing your dart, especially when you are creating style lines, you know, that has to do with bust and all that. So you will need your nipple to nipple. In our own case, it is 19 centimeter. So that's that. Then the other things you need to measure is at the back. So you're going to turn backwards this way. Then you need to measure across. Did I call the front the right word? It is across chest for front. Then this is the back. It is called across back. It's just simple. For the back, across the back. For the chest, across the chest. So for the across back, there's a bone here. When you bend forward a little, you will see the bone pointing, you know, shooting out. So from that bone, you will take 12 centimeter downwards. Then on that 12 centimeter, you will take the across back measurement from the, you know, where the arm joined to the body. This part where my hand joined to my body, to the other part where my hand joined to my body, across this line. That's what we call across back. I don't want to block your view, so I can just check. Sometimes it's usually the same thing with the front. Sometimes it's more. It depends on the shape of the client. If the client has a broader shoulder, you know, this one might be more. And you know, it depends on the way the client stands and when they come for measurements. If your client slouches, you know, just slouches anyhow, maybe the person is tired, you can never get accurate measurement. So it's important the time the person comes to measure. Okay, so this is it. And Natalie advised that we should be generous in taking this across back measurement. Reason being that, you know, when I'm moving, when I'm locomoting, when I'm doing things, I tend to stretch the back. So so that the clothes will not camp you. So I normally make it generous. And if you ask me what is the definition of generous, let's say after I measure the accurate measurement for the across back, I can add like 0.25 centimeter or 0.5 centimeter to it, just to be on the safer side. Okay, so that's that. You measure from one part to the other across the back, exactly on 12 centimeter downward from this bone of the neck. So in our own case, it is 40 centimeter. But if you can learn how to measure generously, that means you make your tape to be comfortable. Please, can you stretch your back? See, now that she's bending down, the clothes will not tear, the clothes will not choke her. So I still have my 40, and that's because I've mastered how to do it over the years. So in your own case, you can measure the accurate across back, then add half centimeter to it. At least use that for your test fit. Then after you understand how it is, you know what to measure going forward. But in all your generosity, you can't add more than half centimeter. If not, it will be too wide. It will be too wide, and it will, it can sag. So there's balance to everything. So the next thing you will do is back length. So you measure from the nape of the neck to where the waistline is, where the ribbon is. So that's how you have to put the ribbon, so that you know where the waistline actually stops. So you measure like so to where the line is, then you mark. Okay, please, you can turn now. So that's that. Then the other thing you will need is the top arm, where the arm is at the biggest circumference, this part. So you measure the top arm, not too tight and not too loose. Just measure it comfortably. Are we together? You might not really need this for bodies. You most likely need it more for sleeves, but then it's in the textbook that we measure this. So just measure your top arm circumference. So now you also need to measure the shoulder. Shoulder for pattern making is a bit different from any other form of measurement. You measure half of the shoulder, not the full shoulder. And you can still measure the full and divide it into two. But to get the accurate measurements, just take half. See, when the client bends forward, there is a particular bone that shoots out at the back of her neck. So take the tape on that bone, then measure to where the shoulder joins to the body. If the client rotates the arm, you can see where the shoulder bone is. This is my own shoulder. You can see how my own shoot out. Some people's own doesn't shoot out like this, especially if they're on the big side. So you need to really know where the bone is. The reason you have to get this accurately is because it will affect the fit of your armhole. If it is too short, your armhole will be tight. If it's too long, you have excesses on the armhole level. So it has to be accurate. So you will take the arc measurement like so. Our own is 23 centimeter from the nape of the neck to the bone, to the shoulder bone. Okay, then after all these things have been measured, you will need to measure the full length of the blouse. I know there's a standard in the textbook for construction, but that one doesn't work for everybody. As you can see, I'm taller than she is. So that means you can't wear the same length of blouse. So it's important to take the measurement. So you put your tape, any vertical length measurement, you put the tape on the highest part of your neck. Then you drag it to wherever the blouse length wants to stop. My client would want her own to stop exactly where this yellow top is. I'll just record it. That's 63. Okay? So if I want to make a dress from my basic block, I will need to know the length of the dress. So I'll just take it down to wherever she wants. She wants it before her knee, so that's 96 centimeters. If you want your own longer, you can measure to whatever length you desire. So that means we'll still have like maybe 1 or 2 measurements to go. The first one is the hip circumference. You will need the hip circumference either for the blouse or for the dress. So the same thing that I explained for the bust is what we are using for the hip. You will need to measure around the widest circumference of the hip. Okay, so you measure around this way. Maybe my client should turn so that you guys can see. I'm so sorry. You can see. Can you see? So I'm not measuring here. Neither am I measuring up like so. I'm measuring where the hip is at the biggest. I'm measuring where the hip is at the biggest. Can you see? And there's no reason for you to be dragging the tape up and down. No. Once you can take the biggest part of the hip, you can really get the spot, you're good to go. Every other thing will fall in place. So you ensure that the tape is not folded and it's not sagging anywhere. So you record. Okay, I think I have 112 centimeters for that. So you need to measure from your it's okay, ma, your shoulder to hip level. You might not need it, but you might also need it. Like so. Then you drag to the hip. How will you know that you're already at the hip? If my client turns sideways, if you turn sideways, I can tell that this is the widest part of the hip. Then I will just take my tape to that length and measure. Not that you take the tape to the back, no. You want to use your eye to gauge and see where the hip is at the largest. But in all your length measurements, your tape must pass along the bust. You can't measure this way. No. This is how it should be. Why? The bust shoots out than every other part. If I measure this way, the length will be shorter. If I measure this way, this is accurate. So I'll measure my neck point to the hip level. So I think that's that about taking accurate body measurement for your basic body's construction. The thing is, you might not be able to take some measurements by yourself. Example measurement that has to do with length. You want to measure yourself, the length of dress. Let's just say, for example, I'm measuring this way, over time, you might master it without bending down. But I can't see what I'm measuring unless I bend down. And by the time I bend, I can use that if the tape is folding. So it can't give me accurate measurement. So what you can do is to get a model, get somebody that you can practice with. So take the person's measurement and submit to me in class. I will check, I'll be sure, because anything you want to construct, it starts from accurate measurements. If you don't get the measurements correctly, your pattern can never fit. So it's important to learn how to take the measurements first. Okay, so that's that. Don't try to measure yourself. You can get the circumference measurements correctly, fine. But how do you measure across back, for God's sake? How do you measure your dress length, all those things? So you might need to get a model, somebody you can measure for. Or you can let somebody measure you, then you use your own measurements. Whichever case, please send your measurements. Let me check before you go straight into construction. That reminds me, just say for instance, somebody wants to construct a pattern, a basic bodice pattern for them, and they send you measurements in inches. You don't need to panic. Let's say the person's waist is 28, just go to 28, fold it, fold 28, create a crease on 28, then turn it to centimeter level to see where 28 is. 28 converted to centimeter is 71.2 centimeters. So just convert and use. But if you are the one taking the measurements, just take the measurements in centimeters directly. That way, it saves you the headache of conversion. Did we get that? So thank you so much. I will see you in the next class.